Welcome to another Soccer Down Here 1v1. My name's Jason Longshore. This year, we've had a lot of 1v1s that have kind of delved into the meaning of the sport and the connections that are made in the sport. Obviously, in a year where it's hard to connect, that's been a central topic for many people. That's a central topic for today's guest as well. Edward Patrick Akinyemi has written a book that you will definitely want to go check out, and this will be an introduction to it and all of the other things that Edward is busy. And Edward, thanks for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Your book, You Say Soccer, I Say Football, is out this week, right?
Correct, on Tuesday.
Excellent. It is something that I think a lot of people are going to want to delve into, and it's something that happened this week that won't make it into your book, maybe into your next book, and it's something that I think we're kind of seeing some of the themes play out that you talk about in the book. The death of Diego Maradona and the meaning of it off the field. And to so many different people, it feels like it means different things. You know, he was the reason I got into soccer. I saw him play as a kid and didn't get to see him play a whole lot because I grew up in the United States, but I always grew up with this myth of Maradona as the greatest. Now, you come at it from a different perspective, but also you're so deeply rooted into Serie A, covering Juventus for SB Nation, that this has had to be a very interesting thing for you to observe over the last few days.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so I'm pretty young, so I was born in 93, in spring of 93. So unfortunately, I did miss essentially all of his career, Maradona's career. But yeah, like you said, just covering Juventus and, you know, one of our big rivals are Napoli. And to me, just not having seen his career, but then seeing just how it affected Napoli, just his death, how it impacted Napoli. I mean, the city came to a standstill. I mean, it was really extraordinary, and just seeing how one human being can have such an emotional impact on the people, on the individual citizens, but then also a city and even a nation. I mean, maybe some of your listeners might have read the news that Alberto Fernandez, the president of Argentina, announced a 3-day mourning for the entire country of Argentina. 3 days of national mourning for Maradona. And honestly, I think that's the only time in my life I've ever seen a president declare 3 days of national mourning for the death of an athlete. So I think that really sums up just the huge emotional impact and how much he represented a country, and just how much an athlete can represent, a city and a country. And it really is extraordinary, just from someone that wasn't able to see him play live, but then just reading the impact. It's incredible.
One thing that's jumped out to a lot of people were some of the images in Buenos Aires of River Plate fans and Boca Juniors fans, mourning together and crying together, and how River Plate has really been out in front in honoring Diego and not shying away from that. And Juventus has as well. One of the first things that I remember seeing on the day that he passed was Juve posting the impossible goal that he scored for Napoli, the one that goes down in history books, and I think actually sparked 5 heart attacks after that goal was scored. I mean, it was such an amazing moment, and Juventus didn't shy away from that. How did you get connected to Juventus? What's your story with Juve?
Yeah, it's a bit of I always want to tell this kind of romantic story about how I got connected to Juve, but to me, it's kind of an ordinary story. But maybe, I don't know, maybe to your listeners, it's kind of cool. But I grew up in the Netherlands. I was born and raised there. And, obviously soccer is the sport of choice there. And I just played it. I really enjoyed it, played it with my friends. And it reached a point where, I was like 9, 10, 11 years old. And at that age, you just, through your peers, through your social contacts, I mean, your friends support teams, and you think, okay, at that age, you want to fit in. So then you think, well, if I want to fit in with the cool kids, I should probably support a team as well. But I think my entire life I've kind of been a contrarian. So, I didn't want to go with like everybody else was sporting Ajax Amsterdam or PSV Eindhoven or Feyenoord. I was like, that's boring. Like, come on, there's got to be there's got to be something more interesting. And around that time, I was watching Champions League football or soccer, and I remember I believe it was April 15th, 2005, or April 14th, I want to say. It was Liverpool against Juventus in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And I was just watching the game, just like, let me just watch the game. And I think it was 1-0 for Liverpool, and I think Luis Garcia scored the winning goal. I'm stretching my memory here, but I just watched that game, and I was like, wow, that team Juventus, they're like really interesting. I know it was just weird. It just for no real reason. I just thought like, wow, that's an interesting team. So let me start following them. And then I just read more about them, kind of watched more games when I could, and one thing leads to another, and then, well, I just became captivated by them, really. So it just started with that, with that cold night, that cold Champions League night, and then, then I just, kept following them.
So how did you get involved with SB Nation and the Juventus site there?
That was, once again, kind of pure luck. It's funny, I read this other book where the author said that life is just kind of a series of coincidences, and then what you do with it kind of determines how your life goes,
wow.
Which I thought was a very beautiful way of describing it. And I think that accurately describes kind of how I got involved with the SB Nation. Because first we were on a platform called The Offside, which is just kind of a blog, really, and, just for English-speaking Juventus fans. And I was a commenter there, and I just, frequently commented. And the managing editor there, he just, we just saw that I was contributing, like, good comments, like, useful comments. And he said, like, hey, I like your stuff, like what you write. Do you want to write some guest posts once in a while? And I thought, yeah, sure, I'd love to. So, I just wrote the occasional guest post. And then we became, I guess, acquired, you want to say, by SB Nation some years ago. I want to say like 5-6 years ago. Don't remember exactly when. But we became acquired by SB Nation. And from then on, it was just, they were looking for more writers because we became a bit more commercial at that point, really. So, we just, became acquired. And the editor there, Danny, he said, hey, we need consistent writers now. So you just want to become like a consistent writer instead of just a guest poster. And I thought, yeah, absolutely. I enjoy doing this. It's a nice little pastime. And it helped me practice my writing, which honestly contributed to me writing this book now. And so again, one thing led to another. And now I'm just, I have a monthly, I guess, column. Really, I just write at the end of the month, actually coming up just tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
Nice plug.
I just write monthly reviews for, this is the month's action in Juventus. So just kind of recap games and just interesting themes and stuff. So, it really just kind of started small at the offside. And then, slowly but surely I kind of became, more involved and became noticed, I guess. And, here I am.
I love what you say about luck kind of opening up so many doors. I mean, I think that's just what happens in life, but especially in this game. I was the same way. I was involved in the Atlanta soccer scene and started writing for the SB Nation site, Dirty South Soccer, before Atlanta United launched. And, that helped me, get better at kind of expressing what I wanted to express. The practice in writing was critical for me there. And I think the practice in just explaining things properly and breaking things down and helped me get to where I'm calling Atlanta United matches on the radio and doing this show. And it's so critical to make the most of the opportunities that come. Now, your background's really fascinating to me. So you grew up in the Netherlands, but now you're in Ohio. How did that work?
Yeah.
Not the normal route we see all the time.
Yeah, definitely an unusual story. And it's funny, I get that almost at least once a month or so when I meet a new person here.
I don't know about the Dutch community in Ohio. So.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of rural Ohio. So, I live between like Columbus and Cleveland, right?
Okay.
Almost exactly an hour between each. Yeah, it really, the short answer is just, it was the job. So, I was, not to go too deeply into my life story, but, basically when I was 16, I moved to, North Carolina specifically, spent a few years there, moved back to the Netherlands, stayed in Europe again for a few years. And then once I was done with all my education, I just kind of went back to my parents. They're still in North Carolina. I thought, okay, well, I guess I need a job now. So I found a job here in Ohio, and actually, it's specifically a AmeriCorps Vista is what it's called.
Yeah.
And actually, that's the topic of my. Oh, yeah, you're familiar with it?
I am. Yeah. I wanted to get into that for sure. So that's what led you to Ohio.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it was just an AmeriCorps Vista position that I found, here in Ohio, and just for your listeners, AmeriCorps Vista is basically the Peace Corps, but the domestic version of the Peace Corps. It was really just that. It was the Vista position that just really, was a position that aligned with my skills, and I just thought, okay, well, let's go. Let's do it. Obviously, I needed a job. I was straight out of college, so I just kind of jumped at opportunity, like we were talking about.
So now all the pieces are fitting together for me. I know AmeriCorps Vista from my work with Soccer in the Streets, a nonprofit based in Atlanta, and we had AmeriCorps Vista members with us a few times, and it was such a big help to an organization like us, and getting to know the people who were part of the program. It's such an incredible program to me. You wrote a book about it. You wrote a book about your year with that. Anything that, you look back on it now a little bit further removed from it that, has carried with you today in terms of your time with AmeriCorps Vista?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the main thing, I always tell people this story of so you have a training as a Vista, it's called IST, in service training, which is just basically prepping you, hey, here's the point of the program, this is the background, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the, I guess, mottos, if you want to call it, that they have is go where you are needed. And, when I first started, I was like, oh, okay, go where you're needed, just this cute little, feel good little message, whatever. But as I got more into Vista and more into the program, I really began to understood what they meant with that. And it does really actually resonate now. Because the whole point of go where you're needed is just like, there are so many issues in the world to solve. I mean, both within soccer, but, outside of soccer. And it made me realize, how valuable it is for people that have really just huge talents and just, in whatever field, in coding, in sports, in I don't know, business, in marketing, and whatever kind of field, to go to places where they really need your talent, really need your skill set and your capacities. And it actually reminds me, kind of weaving it back into soccer, it reminds me of one of my favorite soccer quotes by the former coach of Argentina, Cesar Luis Menotti. And he said that one of the most difficult things to do in soccer is to persuade the talented individual that the game is collective. And I always loved that quote so much, of persuading talented individuals that the game is collective. And I think that's the main, that kind of in going where you're needed, that really stuck with me and just made me understand, okay, you could go to the easy options of I shouldn't say easy. I should say, kind of the more glamorous options of your career, of going to bigger cities maybe, or just bigger companies, or you can choose the kind of less glamorous option and going to more rural areas where you might be more needed, where they need more talented workforce. And and I think that just really stuck with me in all areas of my life.
Yeah, you start to realize that the impact and the legacy that you can leave is really as valuable as some of the material things, and that was something doing, nonprofit work with Soccer in the Streets that has stuck with me and still kind of guides things that I do now. I'm sure your experiences with AmeriCorps Vista and combined with your love of soccer led you to write this second book. Kind of how did everything come together in your mind as you were planning it out?
Um, well, it was a long process. I think it took me right about 2 years to write this book. Because I wrote my first book and then I took like, I don't know, 2 months break or so. And I just started writing the second book right away. Really, I think the more I wrote for SB Nation, the more I realized, like, wow, I do really have a lot to say about soccer, not just about Juventus, but just about European soccer and then just global soccer and just the point behind this sport. But I think the biggest thing really was I realized that a lot of people, and I'm sure you've had this as well, a lot of people always say, like, okay, it's great, this sport, fun, but, like, why do you care so much? It's just a game. Like, why do people, like, lose their minds over this? Like, why do grown men cry about, grown men and women, cry about just this sport in which 22 players kick a ball around for 90 minutes, and I really wanted to answer that kind of that critique because, sure, okay, it's just a game, but, like, the first quote I use in my book is the quote from Pope John Paul II, in which he said that amongst all unimportant things in life, soccer is by far the most important. And I think that just puts it perfectly within its context. It's like it is unimportant, but it's the most important unimportant thing. And that was really the main motivation of just like showing people how like things that seem so trivial can have such great emotional impact on people. And, I just started kind of writing on that. And that's really why as well with the book, I wanted to explain the emotional aspect of it, but then also like the quantitative, the data, the kind of more rational aspect behind it. So, I use a lot of data in my book. My bibliography is like, I don't know, 20 pages or so long. I'm just looking at it now, actually.
Excellent.
It is. It is very long, actually. Now just looking back at it. So, I did want to kind of do that and explain, like, okay, here's why, like, it emotionally is so, like, interest or, like, impactful. But then there's also the data, like, how I think, for example, I think the most important part of the book that I wrote, looking back at it, the most important part of the book was part 3, which is kind of the society and football and society part of the book, because that isn't exactly as it sounds like. It's like the intersection between the sport and bigger issues in society, politics, racism, discrimination, inequality, hooliganism, violence, and so on and so forth, So, just really kind of explaining that story, and so that, people can see, like, okay, it's just a sport, but, there is really more to it, actually.
Yeah, to me, when I've tried to explain it to people, when you go past the nuts and bolts of a match, you go past this team had this many shots and this team had this many clearances, and you get into the feel of a match, and then you go a step further just to the feel of a team and a fan base and the game itself. Soccer might be the sport that, I don't know, explains life the best. Maybe I'm trying to put a little bit too much importance on it, but it feels like it is the strongest encapsulation of what it is to be human.
Yes. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, totally agree with that. Actually, I think I also had a quote in, I think it was David Goldblatt, which I don't have it right by the hand now, but he said basically the same thing. Like, the chaos of soccer perfectly describes the human condition. That it's like, human beings are chaotic. We're brilliant, but we've done so much harm to one another, but then we've done so much good, and it's like it just that pure chaos. And now we see it in the pandemic, just like the pure like unpredictability of life and of human beings. It just sums that up perfectly. And here I found it. Living with profound risk and uncertainty is now the destiny of humanity. We are lucky then that the game we have chosen as our collective metaphor, the avatar of our social dilemmas, should so closely parallel our predicament. And yeah, that's from David Goldblatt
Oh, wow.
in his brilliant book, The Ball is Round, A Global History of Soccer, which, yeah, was a huge inspiration as well for me. So, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's just the pure chaos of people is, summed up in the sport.
How did you come up with the title? That's always the hardest thing for me is coming up with titles or headlines or whatever. How'd you get to the title here?
That's so true. It's absolutely is the hardest. For my first book, it took me ages to get the title. And I mean, I did it last time. I don't know how you do it. I do it last. Leave the title. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the title is a funny coincidence, really. I figured, so, I grew up in Europe and now I'm in the US. So, in Europe, everybody calls it football. And then here, people call it soccer. So I thought to myself, like, okay, if somebody's Googling something related to my book, I want the Europeans will probably Google football, and then the Americans will probably Google soccer. So then how do I get both of them captured into that? And it just kind of like, ding, it just kind of came to me like, oh yeah, you say soccer and then I say football.
That's brilliant.
And that was it,
That'll work. It's
Yeah.
funny because, I mean, it's always a hang up here, I think, for me growing up in the United States and being, the weird kid in the 80s who loved soccer and loved other sports too, but soccer was what I wanted to play, what I wanted to watch. It wasn't very accessible at the time. It was weird, and you'd always get the, like, oh, it's a foreign sport, or it's not an American sport, et cetera, et cetera. And then the flip side is when, I would talk to, somebody who called it football. They'd get really upset that we called it soccer. So it's like, we're just looking for acceptance here. I love the same game you guys do, but I'm getting yelled at both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't take offense at, I don't know. I like to think I'm an adult now, and I'm just like, come on, guys. Like, let's go. Like, come on.
I mean, the Italians are going to come in and start yelling at all of us about not calling it calcio, so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of my favorite journalists, Tim Vickery. I think he said once that football is a global sport. No, universal language spoken in different accents. So I think that kind of captures it pretty well. So soccer, football. I mean, who cares? We all love the same game. That's all that matters.
That's a great way to put it. 2020 has been a crazy year, and there's so much going on in this game. Whether it's substitutions, whether it's VAR, whether it's racism, building community, like so many different elements. What are some of the things that you worry about in the game as a whole?
Yeah, unfortunately, quite a lot. I think the main two things I'll put one just above the other. So the main two things I'd say are inequality, financial inequality, and indeed racism. But I'll just about put inequality above the racism issue. And indeed, I had a whole chapter about this in my book titled, very originally titled Inequality. But now financial inequality is really hugely worrying to me because so in that chapter, I put a whole, litany of statistics about just how much, especially Europe, is pulling further away financially from all the rest of the world. But then specifically within Europe, you have the top five countries, I should say, the big five of Spain, Italy, Germany, France, and England, who just earn, stratospheric amounts of money more than everybody else. So, for instance, in the 2018 European Club Footballing Landscape Report, or the ECFL report, they found that the percentage of total revenue in European club soccer that was generated by these big five leagues was its highest ever at 75%. So 3 out of every 4 euros of revenues produced in the entirety of European club soccer came from just 5 countries. And, UEFA, or European football, consists of 55 member associations. So 5 out of 55 countries produced 75% of all the revenue. I mean, that is completely unsustainable to have so much concentration of income in just 5 nations, And and that's why the president of UEFA, Alexander Seferin, I always get his name a little bit wrong, Seferin, I think you pronounce it. He warned of the risks of globalization-fueled revenue polarization. Just enrich the rich are just so much richer than everybody else. So that's the main thing. But then also racism / violence in the sport. Because, I argue in another chapter in my book that, soccer is just a reflection. It's a mirror for society. So the problems of society manifest themselves within the sport.
Right.
And, as we all know now, politically, just everything going on in the world, and socially, politically, economically, a lot of people are just very, very angry, very disgruntled about their lives. They feel cheated by, government, by employers, by companies. And I really see some people, taking that frustration and anger to the stadium and venting that there, and I talk about a group of ultra fan groups called the Barras Bravas, or the BBs, I like to abbreviate them, who are just an organized group of thugs, frankly, in Argentina. And those are people like that, they just feel disgruntled, they feel hard done by life, and they take it out on the pitch. And I think that's really, really worrying. But in some strange way, I kind of understand. I mean, I empathize with it. Like their lives are not where they would like them to be, and they need to vent somehow. I don't agree with it, but I understand.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think this game can bring people together as much as maybe anything else in the world outside of music. I mean, it feels like soccer and music are so intertwined in that way. Something that always stuck with me here in Atlanta when Atlanta United won MLS Cup in 2018, I had different people from different backgrounds kind of say the same thing. And they were both looking at it from different perspectives, but people who, were new to Atlanta and were grown up in the United States but had moved here. Atlanta's very transient. And they, weren't fans of the NFL team or the baseball team, and Atlanta United became their team and therefore their connection to Atlanta. And they felt like, okay, this is home now. I have a team to call my own here. But also people from other countries who didn't care about the other sports, who had lived in Atlanta for a long time, felt like it was the first time that they truly felt like they were part of Atlanta. And an Atlanta United match, to me, is the most diverse place in the city. You have people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all socioeconomic statuses, and they're in the building with, in many cases, the same shirt on, kind of coming together as one. And it feels a little hokey to describe it that way, but that's really how it comes off. Where there are some of these negative aspects, I feel like soccer has to take the lead in what it can do and the power that it has. And too many people who are involved in the game maybe don't harness that power for good in the ways that they should.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's, with so much power, it's like it can flip the other way. It can go either for a great force for good or a great force for, well, frankly, for evil. It's maybe slightly a tangent, this one, but I always remember this really funny video, really interesting video, actually, I watched about, it was basically about superheroes and villains, and the premise of the video was, what makes a good villain and then what makes a good hero. And basically, just to sum it up, I remember one quote that always stuck out with me. He said that the difference between a hero and a villain is one bad day. And, I think that kind of is the same thing here with soccer. It's like, the difference between just really positive impact and really negative impact is it can just be one small decision or one leader or one person in charge that just says, like, you know what, no, we're gonna harness this for evil, or you know what, no, we're gonna really make this a great force for good. And it can just go it can just go either way so easily. And I talk about this as well in, I believe it was chapter 17 or 16 of my book, in which like just how political leaders used the sport to their own good. Hitler used it, Mussolini, especially Mussolini, used it. Even in Chile, I think it was Salvador Allende mostly, but as well in various parts of South America.
1978 World Cup in Argentina.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that too. And it's just many examples of how political leaders just realize, like, hey, here's a sport in which tens of thousands of people congregate every weekend in close areas, mostly at the time young men, very young, like men with a lot of energy, a lot of frustration. That's probably a good place where I can, recruit, frankly, for my party. And I mean, once again, do I agree with it? No, but it's like, it makes sense. If I was a dictator, I'd probably do the same thing. But there are many examples of that. And, again, it's just, it can so easily go either way. It can be great force for good or a great force for evil. And it just depends on, our decisions as fans, as spectators of the game, and leaders within the game, just, picking that one good day or one bad day to say, you know what, we're going to make this good or bad.
It's fascinating, and we could keep going all day, but then people might not go buy the book, and we can't give away all the good stuff. So let everybody know where they can find the book and how they can get their copy.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can just go to my website, which is edwardp.me/YouSaySoccer. So that's Edward, and then my middle initial is P, the letter P for Patrick, and then .me, because .com was taken, so I had to take .me. So there you go. And then /YouSaySoccer. So yeah.
And how can people follow everything else you're doing? Whether it's with SB Nation or anything else that you're working on.
You can just follow me on. So I'm active not too many social media platforms, but my favorite ones are LinkedIn, Medium, Facebook, and I'm also on Quora, which is a Q&A website basically. But if you just Google my name, Edward Patrick Akinyemi, that's Akinyemi. If you just Google my name, you'll find everything. But then you can also just go to my website, which is edwardp.me, and then all my social media links are on there. So just easiest thing just for spelling, just go to my website.
Excellent. Edward, thank you so much for the time. Can't wait to dig into the book myself, and maybe we'll have to follow up and see where the game is once we get out of this pandemic situation we're all dealing with.
For sure. Thanks, Jason. Such a pleasure being on, and thank you for everyone listening, and, hope everyone is doing well, and, just in this holiday period, let's hopefully try and do something good for one another and good for ourselves as well.